You're listening to As I Was Saying. I'm April Simpkins, and each episode we unpack what's quietly messing with your mental health at work and how to take your peace back without quitting everything. This podcast is for you if just pushing through is wrecking your peace. I'm breaking down the stuff we all deal with and giving you tools to actually do something about it. You know the saying, it's just business, it's not personal? Well, that line doesn't hold up when your boss is your dad and your coworker is your cousin. Welcome to As I Was Saying. I'm your host, April Simpkins, and today we're talking about family businesses where family rules and workplace rules sometimes clash in the most uncomfortable ways. Family in the workplace can be really tricky. Some families are dysfunctional in a toxic way, and some are very affectionate. Some families hate confrontation, and some are, quite frankly, awesome. The challenge is in some small family businesses, the family culture can become the workplace culture. And that can be problematic for the non-family employees. Now, I want to talk about a few families. One is a real case that happened. 3 siblings who each got equal shares of their father's business. And one of the brothers had to leave the business, and another brother stepped in and began to do some things that the other siblings weren't necessarily in agreement with. As a matter of fact, one sibling began to stop paying on certain company-related bills for the other siblings and attempted to exclude them from a real estate purchase. Now, there was a dispute and there were allegations of shareholder oppression between the siblings, but that's not really the issue that I want to point out. What I want to point out with this family, with lawsuits and counterclaims, is just this. The other people who worked in that business had to have the uncomfortable feeling of watching siblings at war with each other while quietly sides are being picked and people trying to protect their job. And so they may lean in with one of the siblings who, quite frankly, may not have been right, but there's a real fear of losing your job. Through my years of consulting, I worked with many small businesses. I can remember one instance with a small business that was started by a father, and his wife was the office manager, and his daughter did the bookkeeping, and his son worked in the company as well. Unfortunately, the son was not the most reliable, and the dad gave him the job because he really struggled to get a job anyplace else. It didn't work out, and some of the really good employees began to leave the company because they did not want to have to work with the son. So the father made the painful decision to terminate his son. And he just couldn't bring himself to do it. And so rather than disrupt his business anymore, he brought in my team to help with the termination. It was clearly painful for every family member that was there. I remember another family business that I worked with that had a son who was prone to missing days of work. And the father, who was the owner, would excuse his son. There was always a good reason that the son had to miss work. Personal issues, child custody issues. There was always a good reason. The problem with that is none of the other employees got that level of grace exuded to them. They had to use their PTO days, and when the PTO days were gone, they didn't get compensation like the son did. And while I'm not here to talk about whether or not that was good policy, I will tell you that it was bad for the culture. And once again, good people started to leave, realizing they didn't have a shot at fair treatment because they weren't part of the real family. And I'll leave you with this last issue that I dealt with a small business that was owned by a gentleman. And in this company, his wife also worked in a senior role. And there was an employee who accused the owner, the husband, of sexual harassment. And who on earth was that employee going to report that to? And it was clear to her that at the end of the day, the gentleman was not going to lose his job. And so fortunately for that company, they had outsourced these kinds of responsibilities. And so it was handled. But again, I present to you that it is so unfair for the non-family members who work in the family business. So that's what we're going to focus on. And this matters truly because family-owned businesses are the backbone of the U.S. economy. They generate about 7.7 trillion in GDP and employ over 83 million people. But here's what most don't discuss. It's the emotional pressure cooker that forms when business decisions bump into family loyalty. There was a survey done by PricewaterhouseCoopers. It was a family business survey. And employees in those organizations reported higher stress and less job security than those in non-family companies. Why? Because when promotions and decisions feel personal, predictability goes out the window. So if you've ever worked in or run a family business, you already know that the Sunday dinner conversation can quickly turn into Monday's HR problem. So let's look at favoritism versus discrimination. Let's draw the line. Favoring a relative is called nepotism. And while it's a morale killer, it's not automatically illegal. And courts have made that clear. But, and this is a big but, when the favoritism maps onto a protected class, either by gender or race, or when it's used to retaliate against someone who complained, now you're playing in EEOC territory, as was the case with that gentleman who was the owner and was the husband and was accused of harassing an employee. Leaders, this is where policy can save you. Performance documentation, consistent discipline, equal application of the rules, even when your last name matches the one on the building, should be non-negotiables. And I will say this, especially for the dad who had to fire his son. If you are going to bring your children into the business and they are not going to be treated by some of these same rules as the other employees, then having some kind of employment agreement will help lift them out of the at-will status and does not leave them with equal footing to those who are not related. And the reason I say this is because if you are a business owner, you should not create policy or standards that you are not willing to apply equally. And the only people who really fall outside of that on occasion are those who have some kind of employment agreement or an employment contract that might stipulate the reasons why they would be terminated from the company. But here's the thing, even with that, it's still a serious morale killer when someone else is rising to the top because their last name is the same and they are not qualified or as qualified as some of the other employees. As a matter of fact, studies show that when employees perceive favoritism, their stress increases and satisfaction drops and turnover risk skyrockets. Harvard Business Review found that non-family employees in family firms often hit what feels like a career ceiling. They stop believing that advancement is possible. And that's when your best people start looking elsewhere. So yes, you can be lawful and still be harmful. And culture, it doesn't crumble overnight. It erodes whenever someone says, that's just how things work around here. Now, let's talk about the moment everyone dreads. And that's when the least qualified family member gets the big job. Like you can almost hear the collective sigh from the team. And this is where governance matters. Strong family-run companies use clear job criteria, independent assessments, and yes, outside perspectives to make leadership decisions. Transparency doesn't just protect the business, it preserves credibility. Because when your employees believe success is earned and not just inherited, they'll give you their best work. When they don't, they'll give you their resignation. So what are some of the things you can do? Well, anti-nepotism and employment of relatives policies might sound stiff, but they are the unsung heroes of fairness, and they should cover things like no direct reporting lines between relatives and required disclosure when family members work together, recusal from decisions about pay or promotions, and consistent enforcement, even when the offender's name is on the front door. If someone in the family violates policy, treat them the same as anyone else. And if you would give them grace, give others grace as well. If you would coach them, coach others as well, others being the non-family members. Unequal enforcement kills trust, and it can become evidence if things ever head towards litigation. Use outside HR consultants or investigators if needed. It keeps things objective and honestly saves a few Thanksgiving dinners. Family businesses can be beautiful. They're built on legacy and trust and shared dreams. But when favoritism outweighs fairness, that legacy becomes a liability. So let me tap into 3 takeaways. I want to say this for leaders, that fairness isn't optional. Apply the same policies and standards and consequences to everyone, especially your family. The credibility of your leadership depends on it. And I say this myself as a small business owner. I have, through the years, employed family members. My mother worked with me for some time. My children worked with me for some time. And even with those relationships entering my business, I set out expectations and made it very clear what I needed from them and reminded them that other employees are watching to make sure I'm fair, and that's important to me. For employees, stay professional and speak up through the proper channels. It's facts, not feelings, that drive results and protect you if favoritism crosses into discrimination. As a matter of fact, it should be a question that you ask either during orientation or perhaps at a 90-day review. You might want to ask about those proper channels if for some reason it seems that things are leaning towards unfair favoritism. Is there a third party that they can talk with? Is there someone inside of the organization who has equal authority, who may not be a family member? However things are structured inside of your business, make sure the employees know, and employees, make sure you ask. And I will say that, for family members who are working in the business, remember your behavior shapes how people see your family's name. So earn your role, don't expect it, and show your team that legacy and leadership can coexist with fairness. Because in the end, businesses built on trust last longer than those built on bloodlines alone. And family businesses have a heartbeat all their own. They're built on love and trust and long memories, which can be both the gift and the challenge. But when you lead with fairness and communicate openly and hold everyone to the same standards, you protect not only the business, but also the relationships that built it in the first place. If today's episode resonated with you, whether you're leading a family business, working in one, or simply navigating where personal and professional lines blur, remember, healthy boundaries and clear expectations don't weaken family ties. They strengthen them. Thanks for spending time with me today. If you found value in this conversation, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And as always, like, comment, and subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast. This is April Simpkins on As I Was Saying. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, and be well.